Welcome back to the Click Chick podcast. I am McKenna with 1828, and today I have Houston with me. Hi, Houston.
Hello.
Houston was a second photographer for me for a couple of years. Don't do as many weddings now, which I miss you, but I'm excited to have you here today. Let's talk a little bit about what you do. You have a rebrand coming up tomorrow. Well, by the time this comes out, it'll have been like 2 weeks ago. But, but yeah, let's talk about what kind of photography you do now and what you're excited about.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm doing currently my niche is apparel and lifestyle photography, and my target demographic for this year is small to medium sized web-based and storefront businesses. So I'm basically just trying to find that niche in the market where people, instead of trying to work for the biggest brands like Banana Republic and Zara, are kind of skipping over like the local boutiques, the small up and coming Shopify e-commerce stores. And those people are just as much, if not more so, in a need for content and art in general than anyone else. So there's a lot of potential money and creativity there.
Awesome. How did you get into, because you were doing weddings, you're doing like family stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
How did you make the switch from doing that kind of stuff to doing brand photography?
I think it's a combination of trying to find something that could be profitable for my niche, and I really just wanted to find the balance between creativity and profit, where I've known that I've always been most drawn to solo portraiture. And I feel like the kind of creative approach that I have is a little bit slower and more meticulous than the kind of bubbly extroverted personality that, yeah, you're already smiling because, you know, it's like, it definitely takes a very like outgoing energy to bring the most out of couples and families in general when it comes to couples and wedding photography.
Yeah.
And even though I feel like I could have the skill set to produce good photos for those people, I feel like if I'm really looking out not only for my own best interest, but the best interest of couples, that wedding photography is just not for me.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people can gravitate towards that, even if it doesn't suit them, because it is one of the most profitable niches of photography. So it's very easy to see the allure of, what you can potentially make out of that. But there's also a lot of burnout that comes with that too. So I wanted to save myself that time and just like leave right from the get-go before, I went down the wrong path.
Yeah. And I have like the most bubbly personality too.
Yeah.
Like working together was always funny because you're very like, I think stoic maybe is a good word for you. Like you're very friendly. It's not that you're not friendly, but you're not like, I don't know. I feel like I'm like, like razzle dazzle.
You're like, yay, that is so cute. And that's just,
oh my God, gorgeous.
I'm just like, yep, you look great, man. Like,
no, that makes sense that you're more like studio based for sure. I feel like I like weddings because it's everybody's interacting with each other and you're capturing those types of moments, like the real life interaction. So it's really interesting to me that you like the more still or just posing an individual person.
More so individual person, but I actually like there is definitely guiding on posing, but I feel like the kind of portraiture I lean towards the most, which is lifestyle, I much prefer more candid storytelling where I like stuff that feels like in between movie stills or authentic moments that you're just being a part of. I feel like maybe that's also why I'm a little bit more drawn towards the niche that I'm pursuing, is I want to showcase people's ideal branding and their aesthetic like in a very natural environment. I'm not as drawn towards studio photography. So I feel like when I combine what I consider to be my strength, which is storytelling through solo portraiture, with trying to find a profitable niche, I feel like apparel and product portraiture is like currently the process I want to go down.
What kind of locations do you shoot at, if not a studio?
I typically do pretty much the same location scouting I imagine you do, where you kind of check anything from Instagram to Google Maps or just scouting an area ahead of time. If anything, I try to travel outside the city as much as possible, especially because if I know I have clients locally who are looking for me, even though I don't target local boutiques specifically, I do get a couple of them. So I want to make sure that I'm showcasing their product in environments that aren't super familiar with them. There's definitely, for photographers who are local to Charlotte, it's very easy to, see plenty of locations that you recognize, especially like Noda, South End, Uptown, yada, yada. So I want to make sure, if anything, I'm going as much out of the way as possible. So I frequently travel to the Blue Ridge area out west, or if I go towards Charleston, Nags Head, I believe it's called. Pretty much anything away from here as much as possible.
Is
with
that
with all the love to Charlotte.
But is that so like their content doesn't look like everybody else's?
More so that, and also I think it kind of indirectly shows an extra level of care and consideration because usually these will be ideas that I pitch to brands, not the other way around. So I want to make sure when I'm delivering a pitch deck to someone that I'm already kind of giving them a cohesive mood in mind. I'm like, hey, I think your product will look best showcased in this environment. And they can kind of tell right from the get-go that there's just an extra level of attentiveness being shown to erase that part. But making sure that there's an extra level of care shown towards them, that they just know that their aesthetic is being taken care of.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that. That's a lot of extra work for you, but it pays off with your brand. I mean, your Instagram is gorgeous. Thank you. It's very cohesive, kind of moody. I don't know. I love every time I see your photos pop up on my feed before I even see your username. I'm like, oh yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah, I'm excited to be posting again.
So we want to do some hot takes today. When I messaged you on Instagram about coming on the podcast, you were very excited to talk about when photographers should work for free.
Yeah, for sure.
Which goes into kind of how you got started and everything. So what's the hot take? Like, let's just jump in.
Yeah, for sure. I think when most people shoot for free, they automatically think that when someone just approaches them for an inquiry, they're like, oh, I should do this for my portfolio. This means maybe I should take the work. There's definitely a lot of caveats that come with working for free. My definition of working for free, which I'll still occasionally do, is when it's there's a lot of emphasis on the word collaboration where it needs to be mutually beneficial. If a razor company hits me up and they want me to give them photos, that's not mutually beneficial because there's nothing I can do with that in my portfolio. But for example, if there's a fragrance brand or a certain men's activewear brand that I want to work with, but then I realize my portfolio, I don't have any relevant content that fits that niche, then they need to see some sort of qualification that lets them know that I'm qualified for that job. So if I'm on a marketing team for someone that's working for an activewear brand and they go to my profile and they see all these, let's say by their opinion, great looking photos, there's a lot of cool stuff, but they don't really see anything that fits their niche. If I'm on that marketing team, I'm going to work with someone who's worked with specifically like men's activewear before.
Yeah.
So I need to make sure that my portfolio is filled with content that's relevant towards my ideal clients. So usually when I say work for free, the kind of clients that I'm talking about are people that I'll reach out to myself. And I also give them the caveat of, you can send me a product, I'll give you free photos, but in return, I want to be able to put on my website that you were a client that I worked with.
Okay.
So it kind of gives me that extra sense of credibility.
Yeah.
And it helps bridge that gap between thinking that you deserve all the work in the world just because you're talented versus not having any portfolio. And even though I don't consider this something that anyone should just do for the foreseeable future, I definitely feel like you need to get your steps and you need to show some kind of credibility. And someone on a respectable marketing team is not going to pay you for something that they don't know for a fact that you're qualified to do.
Yeah. So you're saying like starting out doing it for free, but only taking on what you
there are definitely caveats to that as well. Your time is worth something. So you need to make sure that if you are doing something like this, especially for something that's requiring an investment of your time and money, that you are definitely getting something out of it. For example, the most recent example of that I did is I worked with a fragrance brand based out of Iceland. And I really wanted to have this specific brand on my portfolio, as well as this specific style. So I know that, hey, I've never worked with fragrance before, and now I have this in my portfolio. And same deal where it's, now that they've sent me the product and I have a very, in my opinion, good gallery of photos to showcase for that, I feel a lot more comfortable approaching and offering pitch decks to other fragrance brands.
Okay, that makes sense. How do you feel about saying that it's like a client that works for you, even though it was free? Not that it still counts as a client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were like, whether there was a monetary exchange or not, they delivered a product. I gave them photo assets that they're using for their marketing.
Yeah.
So it's very much that's also for my niche specifically, one specific thing that I put. I'm not just going to do that. I'm like, they need to allow me to put that they were a client that they trusted to deliver them photos. So it's all about just growing my credibility so I can charge more in the future for other people. It's more of a stepping stone process. I definitely don't expect someone to do it in the long term, but I feel like people definitely get the wrong idea when they hear charge for free. They think that because some local musician wants you to shoot photos for them for dirt cheap or free, you should say yes to that, which is definitely not
That's
the case
what I
at
was
all.
picturing when you messaged me. I was like, what does he mean work for free?
No, your time is very valuable, but it's, it's all about getting the reps in, as far as like, you need to, if you know that you want to be charging 4 or even 5 figures for projects, you have to build up your credibility. And I can shoot all the portraits and landscapes and street stuff in the world, but if I don't have something relevant to the niche of my desired clientele, then they're always going to choose someone over me who has more qualifications than I do, regardless of my years of experience or my personal portfolio.
Do you feel like that lessens the value of professional photography because some people will do it for free?
I don't believe so, because I also scale down my deliverables very much so, where they know and I put emphasis on them. It's like, you were sending me a product. So regardless of you telling me it's like, oh, this is worth, several $100s or whatever, like I give them a very small amount of photos and usually no video. So it's all about the mutual beneficial of, they probably aren't in a position, the people that I'm doing this with, to be paying people with anyways, or at least they don't currently see the value in it. So admittedly, they're probably not my target demographic anyways.
Okay.
Because I guess I should also follow this up with saying, most of these people that do it are kind of, this is after I've approached them with the idea of pitching my services to them, and then they'll say no. And then most of the time, if I don't do a follow-up, or I'll just go on my merry way. But if this is a brand I really want to work with, or something that's beneficial to my portfolio, I'd be like, okay, well, if this person wasn't going to hire me anyways, maybe I'll give them a couple photos in exchange for, at least I can have them in my portfolio.
Yeah. So you're saying you reach out first and then they are like, yeah, we'll work with you.
I'm pretty confident that every single person I've collaborated with for just a product collaboration is someone that I've reached out to first, and not the other way around.
Okay. I feel better about that. Like as far as respecting the brand, because I feel like if a brand is reaching out to you and the first thing that they're saying is like, we don't have a budget, like come work for us for free. Like I would feel so disrespected that I would just ignore their email or DM.
No, I mean, I get offers like that all the time where I see they're for free, or they'll be like, oh, $200 or $300 for, several hours of your time. I'm like, this is not worth my time. No, when I say work for free, I guess I should also give a specific number. I've probably only done this maybe 4 or 5 times in the past 7 years. So,
okay.
Yeah. So, but there is a lot of value in doing this, because my biggest client to date, I know for a fact I only got them because of work I had previously done. There was a collaboration that they knew that I was qualified to do the job.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's like the same with, I know you don't do weddings and everything anymore, but doing weddings and elopements and all of that, like we do styled shoots.
Yeah, I was about to say that's a great example where it's like, people need to know your skill set. They need to know you're qualified, because you can shoot portraits of your friends or graduation photos, but no one's going to hire you to shoot a wedding if you don't have a wedding portfolio, and you don't get a wedding portfolio until you shoot a wedding. So, it's like this, it's pretty much the same thing that I feel like translates over and I feel like a very fair thing too would be, instead of a product collaboration, you could also just easily organize a workshop or take part in a workshop as long as it fits the niche of your desired clientele. Yeah.
Well, and it's the same thing too with like, I don't know if I can say this on the podcast. I don't love barn weddings.
Oh, Lord.
I know we're in North Carolina.
There goes all your early inquiries.
I don't hate barn weddings. I will shoot your wedding in a barn and we're going to make it beautiful. But like I would prefer working somewhere a little bit more upscale and modern and more kind of like what we have around Charlotte here or Charleston. Oh, interesting.
What are some of your favorite Charlotte venues? Because I'm very specific about the 2 that I think look good, and I haven't found anything else, to be honest.
I would say my favorite right now is the Ruth.
Oh, okay. I haven't been there.
Like that's the kind of aesthetic I'm looking for, with the like very clean. I think they're even, I would like consider a little bit mid-century influenced.
Okay.
But it's not like rustic kind of. I don't want to like.
I'm not going to lie. I love rustic, but maybe in a different sense. Because when you say barn wedding, I don't know if you're referring to like the lighting, or if you're referring to like a very like country aesthetic, or.
I'm going country, like
okay, I definitely
Mumford and Sons, burlap, sunflowers.
No, absolutely not. I agree.
2010 wedding.
I think when I say rustic, I'm picturing like if I was to photograph a dream couple in a dream location, it would be something like Greece or Italy or something that's like,
oh yeah, love that.
very historic. Still a lot of money and financial involved, but also like a large castle or something on a pier or something that's like historic, but also very nice. I definitely wouldn't want to lean into the like country aesthetic.
No.
That's
well, I was just
I have shot a couple of those.
Vizcaya Museum in Miami. If you guys don't know what that is, it's like, Biltmore in North Carolina. It's like the Miami version of the Biltmore.
Okay.
Right? You would say it's like a huge estate, gorgeous, way over the top expensive.
Yeah.
But it was beautiful. And like, that's the kind of like rustic I would go for.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But like not aged.
No, it's
barn with no air conditioning. Honestly, it's the no air conditioning, y'all. Like, don't get married in August with no AC.
I was gonna say it's the no lighting and no air conditioning for me, but it's also that too. I think it's interesting that people will build wedding venues and the place is built up to be a wedding venue and they don't take lighting into account. Like you'll have scenarios where it's no very clean white, so they know that people that are being photographed or flash that's bouncing off the ceiling, they know it'll be very clean. But then you'll photograph, certain bars or interiors where it's very like muddy brown or red or orange, and you already can tell just from like walking in there, like, oh, this lighting is going to be like a nightmare to work with.
Yeah, I feel like if you're opening a wedding venue, you should consult with a wedding photographer before you like full design the whole thing. Like in Greensboro, there's a venue, Cadillac Service Garage, and the owner, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. This is what I heard.
Okay.
He was a graphic designer. So everything in there is just really well done and really branded. Like you can tell that it's somebody with that like artistic vision. I think a lot of times it's like these barn weddings. People have a barn and they're just like, oh, I want to make extra money because the wedding industry is so lucrative. And they just put minimal effort into it.
Yeah, it's very dark. There's no air conditioning. Might smell a little funky. Like you never really know. Like,
well, and it's so hard to like bounce flash off of anything.
Yeah.
Like if you don't know, the easiest way to use flash is if there's a white ceiling or white walls, and you shoot your flash that way, and it creates like this beautiful lighting. And in a barn, you're shooting all off of red walls, basically.
Exactly.
And, like, that's not the vibe.
Yeah, hot tip. Just know ahead of time to turn it black and white because you already know the lighting's not going to be good.
Yeah, a lot of black and whites with those weddings. But yeah, I saw, going back to what you said, I saw a Facebook post today that was it was asking like how many of you wedding photographers actually make more than $70,000 a year, because I guess they think the wedding market is so oversaturated, and people doing it for free are ruining the value of photography.
Maybe this could be hypocritical, but I would never shoot a wedding for free.
No.
And the way I would translate the mentality I had for product collaboration over to that would be styled shoots, where it's also, these are scenarios that I'm choosing to be a part of, not someone hitting me up for. And also, that when you're paying for a styled shoot, you're getting professional models at beautiful locations. So you're able to showcase your skill set and the best possible lighting, like pun intended. So
I don't feel like I'm competing with free photographers, because none of my clients would ever let someone who's shooting for free photograph their wedding. Like, is this rude? Like, I feel like they have common sense to where it's like, if someone's shooting my wedding, I'm taking a huge risk where my wedding might not turn out. Like, that's anyone willing to work for free. It's a little spicy. Now, that being said, I have worked weddings for free when I was starting out. One of my first weddings, do you watch The Office?
I do.
Okay.
Or
so
I have before.
I got paid in, so I was doing it for free. So I wasn't expecting any money.
Okay.
It was for like a friend of a friend. So at least like it wasn't a stranger on the internet. But I got paid as a tip in Fratelli's gift cards, $200 in steakhouse gift cards.
Interesting.
And I felt like Meredith from The Office.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
When she gets paid in steak for inappropriate favors. But
I do remember which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that I guess that's a little bit different. When you said shoot weddings for free, I was picturing you shooting solo weddings for free.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the value of a second or associate shooter is any lessened, but there's obviously a lot less stress on your shoulders when you're, a second or the rare times even a third shooter.
Yeah.
So I think also, admittedly, because there is a lot of stress going into the day that you need to at least be aware of, even if it's not present. I feel like if you've never shot a wedding before, that even if it's not a very stressful or anxiety day, there's a certain air, like a certain mood that you need to be aware of when you go into it. And I feel like second shooting before you ever shoot your first wedding is very important. Just so you can get a sense of the pacing, how things typically go. Because with rare exceptions of, things potentially going bad or people doing things a little unorthodox, a lot of weddings will follow something along the lines of, getting ready photos, bridal party photos, ceremony, reception, like closing out sort of deal. So I think it's very good to be alongside someone else ahead of time just to make sure you can get a sense of, okay, here's what I can kind of expect. So I'm not completely terrified the first time I'm shooting a wedding.
Yeah, I was terrified. I didn't second shoot at all before I did my first 2 years of weddings or whatever. It was spicy. I did a good job. Like I did a ton of research before, like looking at other photographers' blogs and YouTube videos and stuff like that. But there weren't a lot of resources even for like what to expect. Like now there's a lot of education stuff out there and everything. But it was spicy. But all to say, like, I don't feel like the wedding industry is all of that oversaturated. Like the wedding photography. I honestly
don't think at all. I actually think that there are a lot of wedding photographers, but the value and style of people can go all over the place. I mean, even as someone outside the industry, I'm a little bit baffled that someone would even ask, can you make $70K a year? Because even as someone outside of it, I know if I wanted to put it towards the next year into getting it, it would not take very long to reach that point. And I think most people should feel that way as far as knowing how many weddings a year you're willing to work, what you're willing to charge for it. And I think a big issue that a lot of people might fall into the trap of doing just because they view it as saturated is you get a lot of people kind of feeding off each other where everyone's taking the same education courses, everyone's trying to copy the same style, the same website branding. So it feels very samey. Yeah. So when you're looking at someone else's portfolio and you see a bunch of other people shooting with the same color palette as you, shooting with the same branding as you, charging the same as you do, and you're wondering why you're not getting bookings, you really just have to find your own way to make you stand out.
Well, and people hire you for your personality. So I feel like a lot of these photographers that are complaining about not booking, it's because you're not putting your personality out there. You're not posting regularly. You're not putting your face on stories. Like nobody knows what you sound like, how you work on wedding days. Like just getting clients on the phone. Most clients that I can get on the phone, I'm going to end up booking because it's like they get to know my personality and they're either like, yes, we get along great, or no, we're not looking for someone quite this bubbly. Maybe. Exactly. I don't know.
And it's been a while since I've seen your website, but I definitely remember before I worked with you for the first time seeing your website, and I got a very strong sense of like who you were, what your interests were all about ahead of time. And especially in the wedding industry, I feel like that's very important because if I know if I'm getting married and I want to trust someone, at least with a consultation, not with my actual, engagement wedding photos, I want to know that they feel very strong and confident in their own identity.
Yeah.
Because if someone's online constantly posting about sales or posting about how they're not getting work or not showing a lot of their personality, unfortunately, and this isn't necessarily a criticism, but it does reek of insecurity. And you need to really have a fake it till you make it thing where you need to make sure that even if you're not fully confident, you need to make sure you're always presenting yourself in a very careful and articulate way online.
Yeah.
Because it's a very person forward niche being in the wedding industry. People are definitely going to hire you for just as much your personality as they are the quality of your work. And there's plenty of people that I feel like are very, very successful photographers based more off their personality than their work.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I see plenty of people who I feel like take talented photos, but I just know that they don't have the online presence, the in-person presence to justify charging more than they currently are. There's kind of a pivot, but I'm sure you saw that somewhat recent controversy about 2 or 3 months ago about a certain woman who's local, so I don't want to name drop her. I've
been to style shoots with her before.
Oh yeah?
Oh man, yeah.
How did that go? You seem like you were just like ready to say something.
I'm trying to hold back my thoughts.
Oh no.
I'm sure she's an incredible person. She was rude to me.
Oh no.
Yeah. I met her twice and, you know, I'm like really friendly. I try talking to everybody and like, it's fine. I'm willing to admit like not everybody's going to like me. Like I'm cool with that. Right. It's fine. You can't be everybody's best friend. But I feel like in our industry or the wedding photography industry, like you have to be friendly to other people because we send each other work. Like when I'm booked, I'm sending my like referrals to other photographers and just don't be a jerk. And I don't know, it was just frustrating because we worked on a styled shoot in Charleston and we were like in the same group. We were talking to each other. And then I see her a month later and she's like, who are you? And I'm just like, okay, maybe I'm not memorable, but I feel like I do have enough of a personality to be a little bit memorable. And yeah, it was just kind of like introducing herself to me again. And yeah. Those are my thoughts. I'm sure she's a great person, so I don't want to just like dog her or anything.
Well, I haven't met her in person, but I just knew a lot about the story because she is at least somewhat local, if not local to this area. Yeah, she's in Charlotte. But I remember her blowing up because she was, I guess, admittedly indirectly bragging, more so sharing, hey, I charge $8,500 per wedding.
I do have tea on that.
Should this be included?
I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if I'll put it on a little TikTok soundbite. Yeah. But
oh no.
She lied. So I met I met one of her clients who's also a wedding photographer. And I was like, oh, how was it working with her? Because she was rude to me, but like, how is she as a photographer? And she said it was weird because she posted a video saying that they paid more for their wedding. So she posted a video of their wedding, said this client paid $8,000 for their wedding or whatever her rates are, but they actually didn't pay that. They paid significantly less. And so she's lying on social media about how much clients are paying. So I don't even know that her $8,000 or whatever was like, who's paying that?
Imagine being dragged for something you didn't even do either. Well, I feel like the tone of it was what got it because I on the first podcast I was on, I actually had this similar point where I'm always really surprised over not just photographers, but creatives in general who are so willing to, even in the context of a meme, like drag down their clients and a thing will be like, oh, it's like, I would never work with this kind of client, or, oh, I had this terrible client. It's like, you know, they're probably like both your potential clients and current clients are seeing this stuff, right? Like this is the kind of stuff that I feel like is much better, like kept in your like circles or to yourself. Cause I would never, with the plenty of times in the past 7 years, I've had a potentially, you know, negative client experience or someone who might have irritated me a little. This is not something that I would publicly air out and potentially scare off other people.
Well, I feel like we need context. So this photographer from Charlotte, who we will not name.
Right.
But you can probably find her on TikTok. She posted online about her rates. And I think it was $8,000 for like an 8-hour wedding.
$8,500.
Yeah. And she was kind of.
For a 5-hour wedding.
It was, was it 8 hours, 6 hours? It was like her base rate or something. I don't remember, but it was basically just high prices, which is fine. Like there's a market for that. There's, I mean, photographers who charge way more. Yeah. But she was being really negative about clients who couldn't pay that. Like photographers who would reach out, or clients who would reach out, excuse me, who had a $3,000 budget. She's like, haha, my rates start at $8,500. So that's what the controversy is.
Right. It was the thing that made her blow up was there's a pretty famous guy, famous in quotes, on a TikTok, the This You guy, or, you know, where someone will post something or have a certain kind of personality and the guy will stitch it, I think it's called. I don't have a TikTok anymore, but it'll be like This You and then it kind of blows up. So in that context, she had posted the video and then the guy did This You and then he showcased all like the blurry photos from her portfolio. And the slightly annoying thing about that is, even though I'm not a fan of the trend at all myself currently, you know, I'm sure as you know, like the whole blurry photo thing is a little bit of an intentional trend. It's not an actual. And if you go to her portfolio, she has plenty of decent work.
She's an incredible photographer. Yeah, like
I feel like it wasn't a fair showcase of her work.
It wasn't.
He was going to be like This You, so someone else who's not at all into photography, or even if you are, you might get the impression it's like, oh, this person's not great at photography, but her work, it was a poor misrepresentation.
Yeah, like her work is beautiful. Again, I'm not going to dog her, but
yeah, for sure.
Her attitude is not great.
because I still follow her, and she was getting death threats and like the absolute like most insane stuff. She was sharing some of it on her stories, which admittedly I would not be doing because I feel like it adds a little bit of fuel to the fire. But people who are being jokey or serious about like assaulting her or just basically like telling them to off themselves. It's very extreme stuff because these are younger people on the platform who are super erratic. So it's kind of a mixed bag because I do feel like she got way too much hate for it, but also you are sort of inviting nowhere near that level of criticism, but some level of criticism for when you kind of poke jabs at people who don't have a huge budget who are approaching you. Because admittedly, if I was outside the photography niche, I'd be like, yeah, we have about $3,000 to spend to a photographer. Like,
people don't know what it costs.
Yeah, you don't know until you do your research. I mean, you can imagine that you're going to be spending a lot of money. I think locally, from the last time I checked a year or two ago, anywhere from like $3,500 to like $4,500 is probably like the Charlotte average for a pretty decent photographer.
Yeah.
So I can imagine, especially someone who's not very well off or outside the industry, they'd be like, yeah, let's start looking into a wedding photographer. I can't imagine how I would feel if someone bounced back to me. It's like, actually, my rate is more than double that.
Right.
Which is fine. But then but imagine you getting like dragged afterwards. You're like, oh, well, let me find another photographer. And then you pull up in your Instagram and the first recommended reel to you, someone's just like, it's like this client thought they could hire me for that. I'd be so embarrassed.
I would be so embarrassed. Well, so when I decided she was a mean girl is when she posted. So I had already met her twice at this point. She had been rude to me, but again, like we all have off days, so I wasn't holding it against her. And then she posted on her TikTok a video saying, oh, I didn't realize to be a wedding photographer that you needed a wide brim hat. And then proceeds to post like 20 different photos of photographers in our area, like showing their face, making fun of them for wearing a wide brim hat. And I'm just like, I don't wear a wide brim hat. Like, it's fine. It wasn't a personal hit to me.
I do think that they're corny, but it's like, these are the sort of things where you don't, especially if you're like gonna like we all have our own internalized judgments for sure, but I mean, you're not gonna publicly drag someone else in your local niche. I mean, again, it goes back to that personality thing where when people are looking for a wedding photographer to hire, even if I thought someone's work was amazing and I was looking for a wedding photographer, if I saw them putting out content like that, I would not hire them.
Well, and we don't have to bring each other down to build ourselves up. Like, if that's what you have to do, that's kind of spooky.
A little bit, yeah. I feel like a lot of us really fall down the trap of thinking that we need to just be sharing like constant content memes just to like stay ahead, when I've thankfully noticed a lot of people who are, even if they weren't already well off before, that they can manage to stay well off just by doing what they've been doing. Like, you don't have to fall down the trap of just sharing constant reels and memes and stuff. You don't have to do like a little like song and dance, like read the caption type post on Instagram. And I feel like we've all been there. Like, some of us are currently there. Some of us have been down the road before, where you feel like you're like, oh, I just saw this person, get thousands of followers from sharing this reel. It's like, oh, that could be so many leads for me. That could be really valuable for me. So you feel like you got to replicate the same process. But one thing I noticed myself, actually, when I used to be more into doing that a couple years ago, and I did pop off a little bit from several of them, is that these aren't, I don't want to say genuine or authentic, but they aren't impactful followers. So if you especially if you're doing, unless it's very specific to something you're already doing, if you are a photographer and you share like a meme or something, or you share advice on something that's not very specific to your wedding niche, you might get thousands of followers, but these aren't valuable followers because they're expecting you to share that kind of content. And when they don't see you share that kind of content, they're not going to engage with your other work.
Exactly.
So your engagement's going to go down. Even though you just got thousands of followers, you'll be getting, less likes, less comments, less inquiries.
Yeah, that's why when I started the education Instagram account, I did a separate Instagram for it instead of it all being under 1828 Collective, because I was like, my clients aren't going to want to see this. So potential clients might unfollow me because they don't care about camera settings. And then people who do want to see that, like, they might not care to just see my everyday work. So I was like, separate account makes more sense for this.
That was actually a very big wake-up call for me when I decided to archive my Instagram at the end of last year, and I'm just now getting back into it 5-6 months later, is I realized that I wasn't sharing work that was specifically for my ideal client. I was sharing work that I thought people would engage with online.
Yeah.
Which there is some value to that, but I mean, my clients aren't typically other photographers. My clients are people in marketing agencies, people for apparel brands. People who are doing that typically, aren't caring about camera settings or, talking about clients unless, it's in a very positive way, or talking about my process. Like, you have to make sure that what you're sharing online, you can share as much as you want, but it needs to be intentional.
Yeah. And your personality or your brand, like, I don't feel like, and you might disagree, but I don't feel like for the type of work that you do, being more like brand type photography and everything, that you need to showcase your personality quite as much as somebody like me.
Funny thing you say that is because even yesterday when I was updating my About Me section, I typically have always written things in like the first person. You'd be like, hi, I'm Houston Ray, yada, yada, which I feel like if you're a wedding photographer, is a great thing to do because you want to show that. And I was actually doing a little bit more research, and I was thinking like, actually, I think I want to write this in the third person. I want to kind of give that air of not as personal, a little bit more professional. I do believe that you need to incorporate some of your personality and branding, but there's definitely a very specific time and place for how much of your personality and what kind of personality you want to show depending on your desired clientele. Yeah. So I feel like in this case, you and I have like very different goals and intentions for the kind of stuff that we share, because you want to be very much hey, I'm not a collective. I'm a very, creative, bubbly individual. Here's all about me and how I can make your day better, versus for me, I want them to make it feel like it's a luxury experience. And I'm okay with being a little bit detached from the process of like, this isn't all about me. It's all about what I'm can do for you. I want, like, this is all about, here's my process. It's very easy, that sort of deal.
Yeah. Like, you're not going to be posting memes.
No, as much as I really fight the urge to, no, I'm not going to be doing that.
Yeah. Cause I think I try to walk that balance, sharing on Instagram, because like I am a silly goose. Like I am same. Here for a good time, but it wouldn't be my personality to like lip sync along with some type of audio or anything like that. It's very outside of my comfort zone and like nothing I would typically do. And there are photographers who like that is very much their personality and it works for them. But also I feel like jumping on the train of those videos, you end up with the same content as everybody else. And it's just kind of awkward. Like the first one you see, you're like, haha, that's funny. And then the sixth one, you're like, this is weird. Like it's kind of culty.
It is. And very much song and dance mentality of it. I can think of more than one specific example of someone I've unfollowed because I really like their person. Like I like them as a person and I like their work, but they're posting, 5 to 10 reels a week, which is that sort of thing, them in front of a camera pointing at text, something that admittedly feels, very low effort. Yeah. You can kind of indirectly tell when someone's like sharing something to get engagement on it. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, and this isn't just photographers, I feel like we've all been guilty of this to some degree, is we're a little bit selfish with what we choose to share online, where we're chasing engagement or numbers, and we're very rarely thinking about like, how am I actually providing value or something of benefit to the person who's viewing this. And we take our current followers for granted as we're constantly, trying to increase the number or get more engagement. But we're forgetting, we already have, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people who follow us who already chose to engage with our work. And we are being a little bit disrespectful, I think, by just flooding them with nonsense in a way.
I'm always, when I post something, I'm like, what value am I adding? And sometimes it's just like a pretty photo. And I'm like,
but a pretty photo is a value. It doesn't have to be. And a day where everything can be very noisy, where everything's, very like people chase short form videos, people, they have to grab your attention instantly or they're going to scroll to the next thing, which is just the unfortunate reality. Honestly, it's days like today where I look more towards the people I follow being people who rarely, if ever, share reels. Some of my favorite creators will share once or twice a month, if that. Yeah. But I know that every time that they share something, that they're sharing it very intentionally with value, and they still get, very good engagement because people can feel that authenticity. Yeah. I feel like that's why we've seen a resurgence of, people constantly complaining about the algorithm, why people are switching to film photography. Everyone's really craving some quieter authenticity, and everyone's kind of getting burnt out by the constant like feed of noise that we're getting. So I feel like there is a lot of value in being slower and intentional, even if it feels a little scary in the short term to be losing followers or not getting as much engagement as if you had posted a reel. Yeah. I feel like it's much more important to get less than a third of the engagement you used to get if you know that those people who are engaging really appreciate and resonate with your work. Some of the biggest people that I look up to, especially when it comes to being successful financially in the industry, have zero to like small social media presence. But you know, behind the scenes that they're, you know, putting in very serious work. You never really know what's going on behind closed doors.
Well, and I think the industry, like the photography industry you're in too, there's ways of getting work outside of social media. Like for me, I probably get 30 to 40% of my work from Instagram. Like I posted a TikTok last week and I immediately same day booked a wedding in Charleston because they saw my Charleston TikTok. And so like for me, it is really beneficial. And I think posting, I post usually around like 5 times a week has been beneficial to me. But for doing more like studio work or like what you do, you reach out more to brands directly and it's like, I want to work with you. Yeah.
I'd say, I can confidently say that my biggest clients have all been through personal like outreach and then following up with them. Don't get me wrong, I still get plenty of leads through Instagram and then my website secondary, but I guess that's also about like being a different niche where there's actually a lot of value for you specifically to be sharing your personality online. For me, it's all about my portfolio. So even if it takes me, 6 months or a year to build up a certain portfolio, that's much more valuable for me in the long term than trying to share consistently on social media.
Do you remember what your first commercial job was?
I guess it depends on what you define as a commercial job. A brand, maybe?
Yeah.
That's really hard to say. I don't know. Probably someone sending me I think it was, I don't remember the name of a brand, but it was a monthly subscription box that sends like bespoke type like menswear.
Okay.
So like something alcohol related, maybe like a razor, a knife, like something like that. And I remember I went to Blue Ridge and I shot, just some photos of them in the mountains for them. And looking back, I'm sure whatever I delivered was very like mediocre at best.
I just found an old hard drive of mine and I was looking at some of my first, like this is 7 years ago, portraits. And I was like, oh, I was so young. My work is so like unedited looking.
I think the first time I shot portraits, which is thankfully I've always like charged from the get-go, but when I say charged, I'm almost positive it was between $40 and $60.
Yeah, no, I was charging like $25. I know when I started my Instagram account, again, like 7 years ago, I posted on there, I was like, I'm doing mini sessions, get your slot for, like $25. And I was excited.
I really admire the people who do volume-based clientele, like in the sense that they'll purposely set aside several days to do a lot of minis or a lot of studio sessions. My favorite kind of work ideally is when you have at the very most like 4 to 6 retainers a month. And I know that per week I can commit all of my time towards giving them the best deliverables possible. But then there's also, people who are doing the complete opposite where they're like, all right, like I'm going to shoot 10 different people today, which sounds insanely exhausting to me. Like, just from a social standpoint, like not even from a creative standpoint.
How does that work being on retainer with companies? I've never done that. And then, like weddings, they happen once. But most of the listeners of the podcast are like newer photographers. So maybe getting into what you do, if not weddings. So like, what does it look like to be on retainer with a company?
An ideal retainer is, this can be outside of my niche, but basically because everyone is in the need of social media and website assets, it's very valuable for them to have, a consistent amount of content. Because you can hire, let's say, for example, a hoodie company hires me to give them a bunch of photos and maybe some videos. And it's like, great, they have that, but 2 or 3 months later, they need more stuff. So for me, I'll pitch a couple of different packages for retainer where every single month they'll send me a certain amount of products and I give them a certain amount of assets. So I have the comfort of guaranteed income and they have the comfort of knowing that they're going to get consistent branding assets on a monthly basis. So they never have to worry about content and I don't have to worry as much about money.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So just guaranteed amount of images, however often.
Yeah, images, and I'm doing a little bit more video this year. But thankfully, it works out really well because you can kind of just, I don't really have set rates. I always make sure I have a lot of consultation ahead of time because you will, and my niche specifically, I don't feel like this applies as much to wedding because a lot of people, they'll reach out to a wedding photographer and they'll see a number and then, they might immediately say no. Mm-hmm. Whereas for me, I like to get them on a call or a conversation, at least kind of gauge where they're at, how much money, how big is this business? How much are they actually putting aside for marketing? And then I scale packages based around that. Oh, so okay. I've done deliverables for as low as like $900 a month, or I've done deliverables over 2 days for $6,000 or $7,000 a month. And it scales, wildly depending on, the size of the business, like how much they actually have to put aside towards it and how much you're able to convey your value to them. Yeah. Cause like with weddings, it's like flat rate pricing. Like I have a price sheet and then travel rates. But it's there's also in the complete opposite sense, like there's a lot of value in that too. Cause if I was looking for a wedding photographer, you kind of indirectly, as most people, when they're budgeting for their wedding, like that's something they're like, okay, we have so-and-so to spend on a photographer. Mm-hmm. It's not quite the same as like with the marketing team where, there's some room for them to discuss with their team of, putting aside more of a marketing budget. Right. A couple's a couple, they have what they have to put aside for the wedding. So by the time they're already like getting an inquiry on your prices, you're kind of just selling them on your personality and your portfolio by that point. Yeah, exactly. But I know for a fact I would scare away a lot of people which I used to do this where I'd have just my rates on my website. That's why I don't do that anymore. It's because everyone's needs are different. Someone might really benefit from having only 5, photos a month. Someone might benefit from having like 5 reels and 30 photos a month, Yeah. It's very, very different for everyone. So are you doing like social media content is what you would say? I mean, both websites, social media. I've done 1 or 2 storefront, unfortunately not locally, but yeah. I'd say mostly social media is like well over half of it because in general, a lot of people, especially if you're, a social media manager or on a marketing team, you need content to share. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these companies will try to do, the whole like, hey, I'll send you a product for a discount code, which is great for, one-off things for their perspective, but, they need consistent quality content. So when I pitch myself, I'm giving them, they get consistent branding out of me because, they're always getting it from me. It's always the same style, the same quality of work. Mm-hmm. And they just have to send me the products and I just give them content for it. Where are most of your clients like located? All over. Okay. I very rarely do I work with people locally, actually. So most people just send you product. Yeah. What do you do with the product when you're done shooting it? Keep it. I mean, they don't want it back? No. I've never had anyone I was thinking that at first enough where I'm like, how long should I like hold on to this for? Because that client that I worked with, they're a China-based luggage company, and that was my biggest project to date. And I probably have still in my house like 7 or 8 massive luggage bags. Oh, wow. And I'm just like, some of them, 1 or 2 I've given away, 1 or 2 I use for myself. And the other, I'm just like, well, I don't want to throw it away, but it's like, I don't know. I mean, thankfully, because I'd say now 70-80% of my clients are menswear apparel just because I wanted to focus a little bit more on that this year. I'm a man. I want to focus more on helping other men feel comfortable in front of the camera. And because I feel like I can relate a little bit more to their insecurities or the way they want to showcase themselves on camera. So thankfully I get a lot of products for myself too. Yeah, no, that's sick. I do also give products to my models as well. There is one company I have on retainer that specifically caters towards tall and lanky men. So I actually reached out to them. I'm like, hey, I'm tall and lanky, so that works for me. But they're actually like, when they see tall and lanky, they're talking like 6'4" and above. So even I don't quite hit that. So like when I got the last time I worked with them was for a hoodie. I just gave the hoodie to the model because I'm like, hey, like this fits you perfectly because I got his dimensions. I'm like, yeah, free hoodie. So. Oh, that's sick. But if it's like the fragrance brand, for example, I thought it was a dope fragrance, so I kept it for myself. That's like a perk of the job. That's nice. Yeah. This kind of falls back on what I was saying earlier, though, about making sure that you're being very intentional about when you're working for free, as I definitely don't want anyone to misinterpret and think that you should just work for exchange for products. You should always make sure that it is very much mutually beneficial. Like, for example, because I needed a fragrance brand in my portfolio, I did this collaboration, which means there's probably 0% chance that I would ever do a collaboration with a fragrance brand again, because now I have that credibility under my portfolio. I don't benefit from actually that. I guess another way of looking at it too is when people say work for free, it's not really free when you kind of know that you're in the long term, you're getting paid for it. Like I know that I've gotten work, like, yes, it is free from the client, but I know that there is work that I've gotten only because I got that free product collaboration. So you're kind of just thinking long term for it. But you do want to be very selective when you're doing it just to make sure that you aren't devaluing yourself and other people. Yeah. It's a very gray area. It's not black and white. It's kind of tough minefield to navigate.
What would you do if like a big brand reached out to you and they wanted you to work for free? Like a big like designer.
You mean like Zara or Banana Republic, something like that?
Yeah, sure. Like, would you do it to be able to say, like, I worked for Banana Republic? I mean, obviously they have a marketing budget. So
there would have to be some very specific caveats to that. Like, it couldn't even just be like, oh, I get them under my portfolio. There would have to be some sort of guarantee where I know that other people could get eyes on my work. Maybe I could know that my work would be presented somewhere.
Yeah.
There would have to be something that in the long term, like, would actually make this worth my time financially.
Yeah.
I would actually maybe lean towards no. I'm like leaning towards no though. Okay. Like because even if it is someone very big, I mean, that's when you're entering a dangerous field of if Banana Republic knows they can, hire for someone for free, then I feel like I'm definitely doing more harm than good by that point. Because if other people start saying it's like, oh, Houston like shot this cool campaign for them, it's like, oh, Banana Republic didn't pay him anything, and then I've just set an industry standard on a much greater scale. I feel like I can allow myself some caveats and some gray areas when it comes to these smaller brands who admittedly, decided they didn't have any budget for it anyways. But when it comes to setting something on that scale, I don't know. It's kind of a personal mantra though. I'm constantly like flipping back and forth, trying to just play things by ear. So I can't promise if they hit me up tomorrow that I would just immediately be like, fuck you. But we'll see.
That's fair. I respect that. So before we end this, the last thing I wanted to talk about was with your rebrand. Obviously, my background's brand and design. I've talked about this on the podcast before. But how do you feel now that you're launching this rebrand compared to what you've done before? And just the investment that goes into actually paying somebody to do your logo instead of using, like you said, Fiverr?
I'm very excited, honestly, because I have not shared anything on social media since December of last year, aside from stories. So I'm very excited to not just be playing the game of, I'm like, just need something to share. I need to constantly be sharing. Like now I know that when I'm coming back, it's coming back very much like niche down with intention. I know exactly what I'm going to be sharing, who my target demographic is. I feel a lot more refined in my approach.
Yeah.
And I would honestly recommend I would recommend my graphic designer specifically, Kaido, but I'd recommend any photographer looking to get into branding to hire a graphic designer specifically, because I was very thankful that I was able to have several calls with him. I was able to send him, several mood boards of mine. And I felt very much that my personality was incorporated in a way that comes across as very intentional. And that's something that I admittedly didn't really get from the first two times I had my logo done through Fiverr, where it's like, yes, it's cheaper and I'm sure it's great, if you have zero budget and you're starting off, but I definitely recommend any photographer to invest not just in a designer for their logo, but branding in general, knowing how you present yourself online through color palettes, through anything from the types of fonts you use to the templates you use to the way your website looks. People like to know, even if it's not you sharing often, they like to know that who they're following is consistent in their personal and brand identity. And that comes across very strongly, both to people who appreciate you creatively, but also to clients who might potentially hire you.
Yeah. So how involved were they in the back end of everything as far as like client or like market research and the psychology of color, the designer?
Oh, no, you say, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah. Like how involved were they when it came to like asking you questions about your target market, but also doing their own research as far as what people are looking for with the type of work you do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And admittedly, I gave them a very, not strict, but a very in-depth thing, which they thanked me for. So I pretty much didn't give them a lot of leeway. I hit them up with several examples, my brand ethos, my target demographic. So I didn't just give them an idea of, I'm like, oh, I want my logo and branding to look like this. I told them like, hey, here's, everything. So I feel like I didn't really give him a lot of leeway to, or not leeway, but like he pretty much knew exactly like what my goals were. And
he didn't have to ask a lot of follow-up questions.
And he did definitely throughout the process presented to me several different ideas, several different directions we could go. I definitely felt like he was taking like my personality into consideration, and also just, it felt very professional. And even though it was like, I guess all things considered, just average but moderately expensive for what it is, I still know it's worth the investment, because I know once I have this branding out, once I have my website out and my card, it kind of comes across as a little bit extra than what people might expect from a sole member LLC photographer to have locally.
Yeah.
Which is most of my goal for it.
How long did that take from start to finish, like when you hired him?
He was a little bit backed up, but I'd say his actual process was probably about 7 to 10 days.
Oh, whoa, that's really fast. I have a friend that was doing a rebrand, and it was like a 6-month adventure.
Well, to be fair, I'm the one who's doing my website.
Oh, okay.
So he was in charge of my fonts, my color palettes, and my logo and combination mark. But
Gotcha.
I've been the one doing my website on the back end, which has been dozens of hours. But I'd say if he had been included in that, then that probably would have been 2 or 3 months.
Because they did everything for her. So yeah.
No, I've been at my desk for like a long time. I'll just say that.
So like any like price guides or anything like that's all you.
No,
just using his branding.
Yeah, I've admittedly reached that point when it comes to education where I feel like even though we all still have a lot of room to grow creatively and from a business mindset, myself included, I very much know exactly where I want to start off right now with my approach. And I know that I can personally make those adjustments as I see them. But I'm currently past the point where I feel comfortable in trusting those templates or processes to other people.
Yeah.
Just because I know that my approach is a little bit unorthodox and maybe not the same way other people do things, but that's both a good and a bad thing. And I know what has worked for me in the past, and I'm just building off of that and then adjusting from there.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. Any other hot takes, opinions you want before we end the episode?
I feel like half of this has been me giving hot takes, to be honest.
That's what the podcast is for.
I guess just reiterating and kind of following up on when saying to shoot in air quotes for free with intention is also on the flip side of that to charge what you're worth. And don't let anyone, especially friends or family members, even them, try to dictate to you what your price is. Because, and if anything, this, I guess, is a little bit in defense of that photography we were talking about. Personality-wise or not, like if you decide that you are worth a certain rate, as long as the market doesn't dictate otherwise, then you're worth a certain rate. And there's a pretty good Alex Hormozi quote that says, charge as much as you can without saying an amount that would make you laugh out loud if you said it. So if I say I can confidently charge $6 or $7 grand for a project, and I can feel, I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right to me. I know I can confidently bring deliverables that match that, then that's a good rate to charge.
Okay. I like that. And also clients that don't pay much or family members that ask for discounts are usually the most difficult to work with.
I promise you that the people who have asked for discounts are always the most difficult clients. I think I've only ever had one client who was in like the top end who had a lot of requests, but even then it was like professional level requests. It wasn't someone blowing up your phone or having very demeaning conversations. It's always the people who try to not pay very much. They'll try to lowball you. They say you can get it cheaper elsewhere. They say they only have so and so. And I would say make sure that you respond positively. Make sure you're always handling yourself like a professional at all times, regardless of how people are treating you, because you never know how much word gets around. But also know that it's okay if you can afford to say no to certain projects and to pass them along to other people. Yeah. There's plenty of times where even as recently as a couple of weeks ago, where previous client who had tried to do that same thing, very cheap client, lots of requests. I immediately just didn't want to work with them again. So they sent out an inquiry and I immediately sent them to someone else.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was like, and it was to someone who I know could afford their rate too. So I wasn't, moving the problem from one end to the other. It was something like, oh, like I can't shoot for that, but I know someone who charges that rate. So that's, you're a good fit for them. This is not a good fit for me.
So that's how you phrased it to the client.
I phrased it even nicer than that.
Okay.
But basically
fantastic.
More so like even when clients can be difficult, I never recommend putting them on blast on social media. Like even if it feels like you're a creative and you're an individual, you are a business and you are a brand, and you need to handle yourself like such online and in person.
Well, and it's so easy to get canceled online. Like, let's just be sensitive.
Yeah, it's like just make sure that you're treating other people like humans. And we all know, like, especially people outside of the field, like stuff that might seem like commonplace to you, like, oh, like this is, how dare they request me to shoot this for so-and-so amount of money, or how dare they request me to do so-and-so revisions? Like stuff that might seem commonplace to us is not necessarily commonplace to other people.
Yeah.
And it's important just to make sure we're handling ourselves like professionals, regardless of how irritating or not irritating clients can be sometimes.
Yeah, I respect that so much. All right, well, we will end the episode here. Let's plug your social media. So where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Instagram at Houston Aaron Ray, or my website at houstonray.com.
And I'll put the links in the description of the podcast too. And then for me, as I've said before, you can follow my personal work at 1828 Collective. You can follow the education at 1828 Photo Education. And then I'm on TikTok at 1828 Collective. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you again next week.